Hello again, everyone. It is Gordon Majak here, back with another episode from the spiritual journey out here on planet Earth on a beautiful Monday afternoon in the Seattle area. And today I want to share with you a short story which was written by my primary teacher, Elizabeth MacDonald Burrows, back in 1981 as part of her first book, which was called Pathway of the Immortal. Now, I will be discussing that book at great length here as we unfold things on the channel, because I just think I've always felt this way, and certainly today, all these years later, I still feel this way, that of all of the texts I've come across, I think Pathway of the Immortal, written by my teacher, Elizabeth Burrows, was certainly one of, if not the best, most concise and succinct writing on some of the challenges that we face on the spiritual journey. This story is called The Prince of Peace. So if you will bear with me here for a few minutes, I'd like to share this story with you. And again, this is from 1981. The Prince of Peace. Once upon a time, in the land of dreams, there lived two men who were friends, Mr. Ho and Mr. Yo. Recently, both men had become very interested in the study of the ancient wisdom as taught by the Honorable Prince of Peace, Gautama Buddha. Mr. Ho and Mr. Yo were so impressed with the Buddha's teaching, they determined it must be restored to the world so that the peace of the illustrious master would live once again upon the land. Soon, each man drew to himself a group of followers and became a teacher of the ancient wisdom. While sitting together on the porch one sunny afternoon, engaged in amicable discussion of Gautama's great wisdom, Mr. Ho said, "Surely, most honorable Mr. Yo, if we were to teach even more classes, the peace of the Buddha would descend even sooner." "Of course, you are correct, most honorable Mr. Ho, but alas, I cannot do that. As you know, my wife is a most distinguished lady of the tea, which requires my escort. Both of my sons are now with wives who will soon give birth to my first grandchildren, and such an occasion I would not care to miss. I can barely make time for my students as it is." With that, Mr. Yo nodded sorrowfully and turned his head away. "Yes, most honorable Mr. Yo, that is indeed a perplexing situation. I am quite aware of your wife's noble achievements, and I congratulate you on the forthcoming birth of heirs to carry on your family name and traditions. Such has been the custom of our people for many generations." Mr. Ho beamed joyfully, as such occasions were very important indeed. Having paid his respect to the worthy events, he continued speaking. "And yet, most honorable Mr. Yo, I believe that something more must be done if the peace of the Golden Prince is to once more come upon our land. For if it does not, then the next invasion of the Kong army may find us prisoners and our sons fighting as warriors for the providence of evil. I must indeed meditate further upon this." The two old friends nodded in agreement as they acknowledged this terrible possibility. Upon departing, each man gave the other the customary bow of respect and went his own way. Upon arriving home, Mr. Ho went to his wife, who was also a distinguished lady of the tea, and spoke of the problem that still perplexed him. The woman looked at her husband kindly. "Long I have been your humble and loving wife and the mother of your sons. I have always found you to be a wise man. Therefore, honorable husband, I urge you to fulfill that which is in your heart." Mr. Ho looked with pleasure upon Mrs. Ho and replied, "You are indeed a loving and worthy wife. However, as a distinguished lady of the tea, will not such activities cause you embarrassment?" Covering the lower part of her face with a fan, Mrs. Ho looked at her husband in a proper fashion. My faithful Lord, there can be no happiness in the tea if the clouds of the providence of evil discolor it, nor can the tea be sweet if my sons fight on the side of darkness. Mr. Ho nodded his head in agreement and congratulated himself for the divine providence that had caused his elders to select such a distinguished wife. Carefully, he began preparing for his long journey, taking very little with him except for the golden book of teachings which contained the wise words of the Prince of Peace. Day after day, Mr. Ho journeyed across the land, teaching the words of Gautama and leaving behind in every city the wisdom that would overcome the army of Kong. Soon peace began to descend upon the people, and defeat from the providence of evil became less and less likely. One golden day, a very unusual thing occurred. Mr. Ho was walking along in tattered clothes, his bare feet peeking over worn sandals, when a stranger approached him and bowed low. "May I offer my most humble apologies for disturbing your walk, but are you not the Honorable Mr. Ho, teacher of the words of the Golden Prince?" Mr. Ho nodded affirmatively and bowed in deference to the old age of the gentleman who had approached him. "Well then," the stranger replied, "I have a most perplexing problem, one that can perhaps be aided by your wisdom." "Alas," said Mr. Ho, "I have no wisdom. Wisdom rests only within the pages of this little yellow book containing the teachings of the Golden Prince. I am but his humble servant." Upon hearing this, the aged man beamed and bowed his head as if he were acknowledging some great honor. "Nonetheless, Mr. Ho, I have heard that the wisdom of the prince and the wisdom of your honorable self have become as one. Therefore, with all due respect to the sacred writings, I still request permission to hear your answer to this most perplexing problem." "Well then," said Mr. Ho, "although I am truly not worthy, I shall be most happy to listen to your request." Once more, Mr. Ho bowed low in deference to the old man's age. Both gentlemen then carefully sat down upon the ground so as not to crush the flowers or hurt the grass, in respect to Gautama's ancient teachings. "My problem is this," the old man began. "Once, a long time ago, I had a friend who gave up his accustomed way of life in order to fight the armies of Kong. I loved this friend as a son, and now in my old age I desire to present him with a very special gift. It has been many years since he left to battle the providence of evil, and I wish to ensure that my gift be given to the right person. Can you please tell me how I shall know for certain that I have found him and that I have not erred?" The two gentlemen sat side by side, watching in silence as the sun set and the full moon rose over the mountains. As the evening passed, the old man grew ever happier, for careful discernment is the sign of a truly wise man. At last Mr. Ho spoke. "Although I am not worthy to answer such a question, I believe that he who went forth to fight the army of Kong would have many battle scars. Since a number of years have passed, his wounds would have produced much patience, tolerance, love, understanding, humility, honesty, and wisdom. It is a well-known fact that a seven-headed dragon guards the providence of evil, and the army of Kong can only be defeated by the dragon's death. Therefore, you must seek a wise and humble man." As he finished speaking, Mr. Ho again lowered his head. This answer pleased the old man so greatly that the beaming radiance of his face became brighter and brighter until it was almost impossible to look upon him. Wondering how it could be that the sun could seem to rise again at night, Mr. Ho looked up and beheld the face of the old man. But the old man's face had changed, and there within the radius of light stood his lord, Gautama Buddha, the Prince of Peace, whom Mr. Ho had served all these many years. Lord Gautama beamed upon the prostrate form of Mr. Ho and spoke. "It seems, most honorable Mr. Ho, that I have at last found my friend. My humble gift is but that of peace, for it is all I own. I know you will treasure it well." The Honorable Mr. Ho then felt the peace that passeth all understanding enter his heart. When he looked up to thank the illustrious Gautama, he discovered the golden prince had disappeared. Mr. Ho saw the little book of wisdom lying beside him, and he touched it with gentle reverence, knowing that he would never need it again, for the words of the great Gautama Buddha now lived within his heart. Many more months passed before Mr. Ho, who by then had become known as the Compassionate One, returned to his old home. His fame preceded him, and from far and wide followers came and gathered on the grounds of his simple home, in the hopes that they too might learn the secret of the golden wisdom. Some distance away, in a lavish home, dwelled a rich and sorrowful man, who on this day was particularly heavy of heart. He was sad because the small band of disciples who had once frequented his place for many years had left him. They had come to tell him that they were going to see a wise man who was a teacher of golden wisdom, and they asked him to join them. But the man's heart was jealous, and he chose to remain behind. At last, unable to contain his curiosity, he too headed toward the home of the wise one, who had so long ago been his friend. Nearing the teacher's home, he saw a multitude of people sitting in respectful silence, and a voice spoke from within their midst. The man feared going nearer, and his jealous heart lay heavy within him. Presently, the voice of the wise one said, "Ah, my old and honored friend, Mr. Yo, has granted me the privilege of his presence. Please bring him to me." As Mr. Yo was brought forward, he looked upon the face of his longtime friend, Mr. Ho. But what he saw instead was the face of the Prince of Peace, and immediately he fell prostrate at the Compassionate One's feet. Mr. Ho touched the head of his old friend and said, "How honored I am with your presence, Mr. Yo, for it has been a long time since we have sat together. Come sit by me and accept this humble book. It is all I own, as the rest belongs to the Prince of Peace." Mr. Ho handed Mr. Yo a faded and worn little yellow book of wisdom. Conclusion. This story illustrates the dedication required to fulfill a spiritual mission and to achieve true greatness, neither of which is weighed by wealth or fame. Unfortunately, very few people are willing to give up the personal life for the impersonal life, and most people believe it is unnecessary to do so. Therefore, when a Buddha or a Christ or some other great teacher appears, the masses are in awe and eager to worship him, without realizing that a similar seed of greatness lays dormant within themselves. Others who have begun their conscious spiritual journey tend to look only at where they are now rather than where they are going, thus limiting their awareness of higher possibilities. If the seed of higher consciousness is not anchored and carefully nurtured by spiritual practices conducive to its continued growth, there is insufficient power within the aspirant to meet the challenges of mastery. In today's world, only about 0.2% of the population manages to reach this birth into higher consciousness. That may sound discouraging, but it emphasizes the fact that the mass of humanity still dwells within the narrow prison confines of a human world, unaware of the greater visage that lies beyond. So that is The Prince of Peace, written in 1981 by my teacher, Elizabeth Burrows, and included in her first book, Pathway of the Immortal. And as I said, we will be spending a considerable amount of time here on the channel discussing not only my teacher, Elizabeth Burrows, but that book, Pathway of the Immortal, as I truly believe that it is one of the great and most concise and powerful illustrations or examples of the path of mastership. And I am so grateful to my teacher for sharing that with me, and we will be talking about that more as time goes on. I wanted to share that with you. I hope you guys enjoyed the Prince of Peace. Let me know in the comments what you think about that and how you are managing with some of these challenges on the spiritual journey. Do you feel called to be a teacher yourself? Are you content to be a student? These are the challenges and questions that I have to deal with within myself, and I know that I'm not alone out there. So stay tuned. More to come on the big channel. Hope you enjoyed that story. I will see you again very soon. God bless you all. I love you. Thank you for watching so much. Appreciate it. Take care.